You need to move. This seat isn't for people like you.
Isabella Rodriguez didn't whisper it. She announced it loud enough for every passenger in first class to turn and stare. The man in seat 1A, dressed in a simple black hoodie and designer sneakers, looked up calmly from his phone. "Excuse me, Marcus Williams," asked, his voice steady but his eyes sharp. "You heard me." Isabella crossed her arms, her 15 years of flight attendant experience giving her a confidence she was about to lose forever. "That seat belongs to our Platinum members. There's obviously been some kind of mistake with your ticket. Before we dive into this story, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of how they dress, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to witness will change how you think about power, dignity, and justice at 30,000 feet. JFK International Airport buzzed with its usual Tuesday morning chaos. Terminal 4 hummed with the sounds of rolling luggage departure announcements and the constant chatter of travelers heading to destinations around the globe. But inside the first-class cabin of Vanguardia Flight 5, A847 to London, a different kind of noise was brewing. Marcus Williams had boarded quietly, just another passenger in the stream of business travelers making their way to Europe. He carried a worn leather duffel bag that looked like it had seen better days, and his outfit, a premium black hoodie, dark jeans, and pristine white sneakers, screamed comfort over corporate formality. At 45, Marcus had learned that comfort mattered more than appearances, especially during the grueling international flights that had become a regular part of his life. He found his seat 1A and settled in with the practiced ease of someone who had done this thousands of times before. The premium suite offered the privacy he needed for the work ahead. He had documents to review, calls to make, and a merger worth $850 million waiting for his signature in London. But first he needed sleep. The last 72 hours had been brutal. "Can I get you anything before takeoff, sir?" The voice belonged to Sarah Mitchell, a junior flight attendant who couldn't have been older than 25. Her smile was genuine, her approach professional. "Sparkling water. No ice." Marcus replied, not looking up from his phone. "Thank you." Sarah nodded and moved on to the next passenger. But her simple, respectful interaction had been observed by Bradford Kingston, who sat across the aisle in 1B, and it bothered him. Bradford was the kind of man who measured his worth by the deference others showed him. At 52, he had spent 3 decades building his reputation as a senior partner at Meridian Capital, a $12 billion hedge fund that specialized in transportation and logistics investments. He flew this exact route every Tuesday heading to London to check on European holdings, and he expected recognition. More than that, he expected his worldview to be validated. And his worldview didn't include black men in hoodies flying first class. "Excuse me?" Bradford called out loud enough to catch Sarah's attention. "I think there might be some confusion here." Sarah approached Bradford's seat, her professional smile intact. "Yes, Mr. Kingston. How can I help you?" Bradford nodded toward Marcus. "I fly this route every week. Same seat, same flight. I know who belongs up here." He lowered his voice, but not enough. "That gentleman there, I don't think he's supposed to be in first class." Sarah's smile faltered. She glanced at Marcus, who was still focused on his phone, seemingly unaware of the conversation happening about him. "Sir, I checked his boarding pass when he boarded. Everything looked—" "Look at him!" Bradford interrupted, his voice carrying across the cabin. "Does he look like someone who flies first class? Come on, Sarah. Use your common sense." The words hung in the air like smoke. Other passengers began to take notice. The man in 2C looked up from his newspaper. The woman in 3A paused her phone conversation. Even Marcus finally raised his eyes, meeting Bradford's gaze with a steady stare that revealed nothing. That's when Isabella Rodriguez appeared. Isabella had been with Vanguardia for 15 years. She had worked her way up from domestic routes to international flights, from economy to first class. She took pride in maintaining standards and ensuring that first class remained exclusive premium special. She had trained herself to spot potential problems before they became actual problems. And looking at Marcus Williams, she saw a problem. "What seems to be the issue here?" Isabella asked, directing her question to Bradford, but keeping her eyes on Marcus. "I was just telling Sarah," Bradford said, speaking louder now that there might be some confusion with seating assignments. "I'm a Platinum Legacy member. I fly this route every Tuesday. I know the passengers who typically sit up here and—" He gestured toward Marcus with barely concealed disdain. "Well, let's just say this is unusual." Isabella nodded, understanding immediately. She had dealt with situations like this before, though never quite so directly. Usually, these matters resolve themselves quietly. A polite conversation, a gentle suggestion, a complimentary upgrade to premium economy. Problem solved. Sir, Isabella said, approaching Marcus with the kind of professional smile that masked less professional thoughts. "I'm Isabella Rodriguez, senior flight attendant. May I see your boarding pass, please?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment. He had been through this before in different forms, in different places. Hotels that questioned his reservations. Restaurants that claimed they were fully booked despite empty tables. Boardrooms where his presence was challenged until someone Googled his name. "Is there a problem with my ticket?" Marcus asked, his voice calm, but with an edge that suggested he knew exactly what kind of problem Isabella thought she was dealing with. "Just a routine check," Isabella replied. "We've had some issues with our booking system today, and I want to make sure everything is correct." Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his mobile boarding pass. "Marcus Williams, Seat 1A. Purchased 3 weeks ago." He held the screen toward Isabella, who glanced at it without really looking. "I see," Isabella said. "And how did you acquire this ticket? Was it purchased through a corporate account or—" "I bought it," Marcus said simply. "With my credit card, just like everyone else." Bradford leaned forward in his seat. "Look, I don't want to cause a scene, but I think we all know what's happening here. This is first class. It costs $12,000 for this seat. Now, I'm not saying anything about this gentleman personally, but what Marcus asked, standing up. At 6 feet 2 inches, he commanded the space around him, and his calm demeanor somehow made his presence more imposing, not less. "What exactly are you saying about me personally?" The cabin fell silent. Even the ambient noise of the aircraft seemed to fade as other passengers stopped their conversations and turned their attention to the unfolding confrontation. Bradford's face flushed red. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered beneath his social standing. "I'm saying that mistakes happen. Booking errors, fraudulent transactions, people using tickets that don't belong to them. It's not personal, it's just practical." "Practical," Marcus repeated, his tone flat. "And what makes you think my ticket doesn't belong to me?" "Well, I mean," Bradford gestured vaguely at Marcus's outfit. "Look at how you're dressed. Look at—" He trailed off, realizing that finishing his sentence would reveal exactly what kind of man he was. "Look at what Marcus pressed. My skin color." The words dropped into the cabin like a stone into still water, sending ripples of discomfort through every conversation, every glance, every held breath. "Now hold on," Isabella interjected, stepping between them. "No one said anything about race. This is simply a matter of verifying ticket authenticity. We have procedures. You have procedures for checking black passengers differently than white passengers," Marcus asked. "That's not what I said," Isabella replied, but her voice had lost some of its authority. "Sir, I'm going to need to see additional identification, credit card, driver's license, something that confirms this ticket belongs to you." Marcus looked around the first-class cabin. "Did you check his ID?" He nodded toward Bradford. "Did you ask anyone else for additional verification?" Isabella's professional mask was starting to slip. "Mr. Kingston is a known passenger. He's Platinum Legacy. So status determines how you're treated, Marcus asked. Or does something else determine status? The question hung in the air unanswered, but understood by everyone within earshot. Bradford stood up, his face now fully red with indignation. This is ridiculous. Isabella, just call security. Get him off the plane. People like this, they find tickets, they steal credit cards, they scam their way into places they don't belong. It happens all the time. People like what Marcus asked, his voice still calm, but his eyes now locked onto Bradford with laser focus. You know exactly what I mean, Bradford shot back. Say it, Marcus challenged. Tell everyone exactly what you mean. The cabin was dead silent now. Even the flight crew had stopped their pre-flight preparations to watch the confrontation unfold. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen near the galley, her face pale with discomfort. Other passengers held their phones, some beginning to record. Bradford opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, realizing that any words he spoke would damn him completely. Isabella seized the moment to regain control. Gentlemen, please. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. Sir, she addressed Marcus directly, I'm going to need you to come with me to the front of the aircraft. We can sort this out privately. Sort what out? Marcus asked. I have a valid ticket for a seat I paid for. What exactly needs to be sorted out? The validity of your ticket, Isabella said, her patience wearing thin. And, frankly, your attitude isn't helping the situation. My attitude, Marcus repeated. What attitude would you prefer? Should I be grateful that you're questioning my right to sit in a seat I purchased? Should I thank you for assuming I'm a criminal? Bradford couldn't contain himself any longer. Look, pal, this is first class. This isn't the subway. This isn't some community center. This is for people who've earned the right to be here. People who contribute to society. People who look like you. Marcus finished. People who belong here. Bradford exploded. Yes, I said it. People who fit in. People who understand what first class means. People who respect the exclusivity of Mr. Kingston. Isabella tried to silence him, but it was too late. The words were out, captured by multiple phone cameras, witnessed by 30 other passengers, and impossible to take back. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who had just gotten exactly what he needed. Thank you, Bradford, Marcus said, for saying what you really think, for showing everyone exactly who you are. He turned to Isabella. And thank you for enabling him, for assuming that his word carries more weight than my ticket, for treating me like a criminal instead of a customer. Isabella's face had gone white. She realized too late how badly she had mishandled the situation. Sir, I apologize if there was any misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Marcus said. You both made yourselves perfectly clear. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Bradford, still red-faced and angry, stepped closer to Marcus. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to call security. We're going to have you removed from this aircraft, and we're going to make sure you never fly first class again. People like you need to learn your place. The words echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Marcus looked at Bradford for a long moment, then at Isabella, then at the other passengers who were watching with a mixture of horror and fascination. Then he reached for his phone. You want to know my place? Marcus said, his finger hovering over his contacts list. Let me show you my place. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife, but to understand what was about to happen, we need to step back and understand exactly who Marcus Williams was and why the next phone call would change everything. Marcus Williams wasn't just another businessman in a hoodie. He was the founder and CEO of Global Link Companies, a technology infrastructure giant that most people had never heard of but couldn't live without. If you've ever booked a flight online, your reservation went through Marcus's servers. If you've ever used a credit card at 30,000 feet, the transaction cleared through his payment systems. If an airline needed to communicate with air traffic control, the data flowed through his networks. Marcus owned the digital backbone of the aviation industry, and very few people knew it. He had built Global Link from nothing, starting in a garage in Detroit 22 years ago with a used laptop and an idea. The idea was simple: create a unified system that could handle the massive data flows between airlines, airports, hotels, and financial institutions in real time. The execution was anything but simple. It had taken Marcus 15 years to build the infrastructure, establish the partnerships, and prove the reliability that made Global Link indispensable to the travel industry. Today, his company processed over 200 million transactions daily across 47 countries. When Global Link went down, which happened maybe twice a year for scheduled maintenance, the global travel industry held its breath. But Marcus's success hadn't come easily. Early in his career, he had applied for junior positions at every major airline in the country. The interviews always went the same way: impressive resume, stellar recommendations, perfect technical skills. Then he would walk into the room and the atmosphere would change. Suddenly, he wasn't airline material. He didn't fit the corporate culture. He lacked the professional image they were looking for. After the 16th rejection, Marcus stopped looking for jobs and started building his own company instead. The irony wasn't lost on him that the same airlines that had once rejected him for not looking professional enough now depended on his systems to operate. But Marcus wasn't petty. He was practical. He provided excellent service to all his clients regardless of their past behavior. He believed in letting his work speak for itself. Today was different, though. Today was personal. Marcus had been flying undercover for the past month, documenting discrimination complaints that had been flooding his company's customer service channels. His clients, major airlines around the world, were facing increasing public relations nightmares as passengers shared videos of biased treatment online. The complaints were hurting everyone's bottom line, and Marcus's clients had asked him to investigate. So he had taken off his CEO title, put on civilian clothes, and started flying. What he discovered was worse than he had imagined. The discrimination wasn't accidental or isolated. It was routine, ingrained, accepted as normal business practice. Flight attendants were trained to identify high-value customers and prioritize their comfort. But the training materials were full of coded language about appearance, speech patterns, and cultural markers that effectively created a hierarchy based on race and class. Gate agents routinely upgraded white passengers while leaving black passengers in middle seats. Security personnel subjected certain passengers to additional screening based on nothing more than assumptions and stereotypes. Marcus had documented 12 incidents across 8 airlines in 4 weeks. He had video evidence, audio recordings, and witness statements. He had enough material to file discrimination lawsuits that would cost the industry billions of dollars. But he was hoping he wouldn't need to use it. He was hoping that presenting the evidence privately to airline executives would be enough to trigger meaningful change. He believed in giving people the opportunity to do the right thing before forcing them to do it. That hope was dying fast. Bradford Kingston represented everything Marcus had fought against his entire career. Born into wealth, raised with privilege, Bradford had never had to question whether he belonged anywhere. His father had been a senator, his grandfather an oil baron, and Bradford himself had parlayed family connections into a partnership at Meridian Capital. But Bradford's success was built on a foundation that was cracking. His fund specialized in transportation and logistics investments, which meant his portfolio was heavily weighted toward airline stocks. Vanguardia Airlines alone represented 18% of Meridian's total holdings. If something happened to disrupt the airline industry, Bradford would lose hundreds of millions of dollars. He just didn't know that the man sitting across the aisle had the power to make that happen with a single phone call. Isabella Rodriguez was caught in the middle, a working mother trying to do her job in an industry that rewarded her for maintaining an exclusive atmosphere. She had started as a flight attendant 15 years ago, worked her way up from domestic routes to international flights from economy to first class. She was proud of her position and protective of the standards that she believed made first class special. But Isabella's training had included subtle lessons about identifying passengers who might not belong in premium cabins. The training never explicitly mentioned race, but it didn't need to. The examples were clear passengers who were inappropriately dressed, who lacked sophistication, who might not understand first-class etiquette, who could make other passengers uncomfortable. Isabella genuinely believed she was protecting the first-class experience for passengers who had earned it. She didn't see herself as discriminatory. She saw herself as professional, discerning, committed to excellence. She was about to learn the difference between excellence and exclusion. The other passengers in first class represented a cross-section of wealth and privilege, but they also represented something else, witnesses. In the age of social media, nothing happened in isolation anymore. Every interaction was potentially public, every moment potentially viral. Emma Rodriguez, a travel blogger with 250,000 Instagram followers, was already reaching for her phone. She had built her brand on authenticity, on sharing the real experiences of travel, both good and bad. What she was witnessing was definitely worth sharing. David Park, a business consultant heading to London for a merger negotiation, was thinking about the implications of what he was seeing. As someone who specialized in corporate culture and leadership, he recognized a crisis in the making. He was already mentally composing the LinkedIn post he would write about unconscious bias in customer service. Lisa Thompson, a high school teacher from Queens, was simply outraged. She had saved for 2 years to afford this first-class ticket for her dream vacation to London, and she was watching a fellow passenger being treated like a criminal for no reason other than his appearance. Her TikTok account had only 3,000 followers, but she was about to post the most important video of her life. What none of them knew, not Isabella, not Bradford, not even Marcus himself until this moment, was that this confrontation would become a case study in corporate accountability, a turning point in aviation industry culture, and a reminder that in the modern world, power doesn't always come dressed in a suit. The stakes were higher than anyone realized. Marcus's company controlled the infrastructure that kept the global aviation industry running. Bradford's fund controlled hundreds of millions in airline investments. Isabella's actions would determine whether she kept her job or lost everything she had worked 15 years to build. And 30 other passengers were about to become witnesses to one of the most dramatic demonstrations of hidden power in corporate history. Marcus looked down at his phone, scrolled through his contacts, and found the number he needed. His sister, Dr. Patricia Williams, Chief Operating Officer of Global Link Companies, would be in the London office right now overseeing the European operations that kept half the continent's flights on schedule. One call from Marcus and Patricia would have the authority to shut down every system that Vanguardia Airlines needed to operate. Reservations, check-in, payment processing crew, scheduling, maintenance, tracking, fuel management, air traffic, communication, all of it would go dark. The question wasn't whether Marcus could ground every Vanguardia flight in the world. The question was whether Bradford Kingston and Isabella Rodriguez had given him enough reason to do it. Marcus's thumb hovered over Patricia's contact information. In the seat across from him, Bradford was still red-faced with indignation, muttering about security and inappropriate passengers. Standing in the aisle, Isabella was trying to decide whether to escalate the situation further or find a way to de-escalate before it got worse. Around them, other passengers were reaching for their phones, sensing that something significant was about to happen. None of them understood that the next 60 seconds would determine whether 152 aircraft around the world continued flying or sat grounded on tarmacs from New York to Tokyo, whether stock prices rose or crashed, whether a 15-year flight attendant kept her job or lost her career, and whether a hedge fund manager remained wealthy or filed for bankruptcy. Marcus looked up from his phone and made eye contact with Isabella. "Last chance," he said quietly. "You can apologize, seat me in the chair I paid for, and we can all pretend this never happened. Or you can double down on your assumptions and deal with the consequences." Bradford laughed harshly. "Consequences? What consequences? You think you can threaten us? You think anyone cares what you say?" Isabella, sensing that the situation was spiraling out of control, but unable to back down without losing face, made her choice. "Sir, I'm calling the captain. You need to leave this aircraft immediately." Marcus nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "Okay," he said. "You made your choice." He touched Patricia's number on his phone. The call connected on the first ring. Patricia Marcus said into his phone, his voice carrying clearly through the first-class cabin. "It's happening again. Flight fee. A847. Isabella frowned, reaching for the phone. "Sir, you can't make personal calls." During Marcus held up one finger, silencing her with a gesture so authoritative that she actually stopped mid-sentence. Other passengers looked up from their magazines and phones, sensing that something significant was unfolding. "Are you certain?" The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, with just a hint of a British accent. Dr. Patricia Williams had been handling crises for Global Link for over a decade, but her brother didn't call the emergency line unless things were serious. Completely certain, Marcus replied, his eyes locked on Isabella. "They want me removed from a seat I purchased because I don't look like I belong in first class. Multiple staff members involved. Passenger harassment. The works." Bradford stood up, his face purple with rage. "Who the hell do you think you are? You can't just—" Marcus turned to look at Bradford, and something in his expression made the hedge fund manager take a step back. "I'm Marcus Williams," Marcus said simply. "And you're about to find out exactly who I am." Isabella was losing control of the situation. She could see other passengers filming with their phones, could sense that this was escalating beyond her ability to manage quietly. But her training, her instincts, and her assumptions all pushed her toward the same response. Escalate the authority, remove the problem, passenger, restore order to first class. "Captain Morrison," she said into her service phone, "we have a security situation in first class. Passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions, making threatening phone calls. We need immediate assistance." The response came through clearly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Copy that, Isabella. Airport security is on the way. ETA 3 minutes. Emma Rodriguez, the travel blogger, was already live streaming on Instagram. "You guys, this is insane," she whispered into her phone. "They're calling security on a man for sitting in first class. He has a valid ticket, he's not causing any problems, but the flight attendant and this other passenger are acting like he committed a crime." David Park was typing rapidly on his LinkedIn app, watching blatant discrimination unfold in real time on Vanguardia Flight 5. A847. Professional black man being harassed by crew and fellow passenger for not belonging in first class. This is 2024, people. This is unacceptable. Lisa Thompson had started recording on TikTok. "Y'all, I cannot believe what I'm witnessing right now. This flight attendant just called security on a black man for existing in first class. His ticket is valid, he's been nothing but polite, and they're treating him like a criminal. This is why we need to keep recording these situations." The social media posts were already starting to gain traction. Emma's live stream had attracted over 1,000 viewers in the first 2 minutes. David's LinkedIn post was being shared by his network of corporate professionals. Lisa's TikTok was spreading through the algorithm with hashtags like discrimination flying and viral. But none of the social media attention was penetrating the bubble of authority and assumption that Isabella and Bradford had created around themselves. Sir Isabella said to Marcus, her voice now carrying the full weight of her 15 years of airline experience. "You have 2 options. You can gather your belongings and leave this aircraft voluntarily, or you can be removed by security. Those are your only choices." Marcus was still on the phone. "Patricia, did you catch all of that?" Every word his sister replied. "The threat, the security call, the assumption that you don't belong." "Marcus, if you do this, there's no taking it back. 152 aircraft, 89,000 passengers, 2.1 billion in market capitalization. I understand the numbers," Marcus said. "Do you understand the principle?" There was a pause. Then command authority transferred, awaiting your instruction. Bradford had been listening to Marcus's side of the conversation with growing alarm. Something about the calm confidence in Marcus's voice, the technical terminology, the references to numbers and market capitalization was starting to penetrate his rage-fueled assumptions. "Wait," Bradford said, his voice suddenly uncertain. "What company did you say you work for?" Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "I didn't say I work for a company, Bradford. I said I own one." The airport security team appeared at the aircraft door. 3 officers in uniform led by Sergeant Miguel Santos, a 20-year veteran who had seen every kind of passenger disturbance imaginable. They approached the first-class cabin with the professional competence of people who dealt with airline drama every day. "Isabella Rodriguez," Sergeant Santos asked, consulting his notepad. "You reported a security situation." Isabella straightened her professional mask firmly in place. "Yes, officer. This gentleman," she indicated Marcus, "is refusing to comply with crew instructions. He's occupying a seat fraudulently, making threatening phone calls, and disrupting the flight." Sergeant Santos looked at Marcus, taking in his calm demeanor, his quality clothing, his relaxed posture. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass and identification?" Marcus handed over his phone with the mobile boarding pass and his driver's license. Santos examined both carefully. "Marcus Williams, seat 1. A purchased 3 weeks ago." Santos read aloud. "Everything appears to be in order." "What's the nature of the dispute?" Isabella's composure cracked slightly. "Well, there were questions about the authenticity of the ticket." "And Mr. Kingston here," she gestured to Bradford, expressed concerns about. "About what?" Santos asked, his tone sharpening. He had worked airport security long enough to recognize discrimination when he saw it. Bradford, sensing that the narrative was shifting away from him, tried to regain control. "Officer, I'm Bradford Kingston, senior partner at Meridian Capital. I fly this route every week. I know the passengers who typically sit in first class, and this situation is highly unusual." Santos turned his attention to Bradford. Unusual how Sir Bradford opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing that any answer he gave would expose his motivations completely. "I see," Santos said. "So, you're reporting suspicious activity based on your familiarity with typical passenger demographics?" The sarcasm in Santos's voice was subtle, but unmistakable. Marcus was still on his phone call. "Patricia, are you getting all this? Security officer doing his job professionally, flight attendant doubling down on discrimination, hedge fund manager realizing he might have made a mistake?" "Recording everything," Patricia replied. "Marcus, the systems are ready. All I need is your authorization code." Isabella was beginning to realize that she had made a serious error in judgment, but she was too far committed to back down gracefully. The security officers were clearly not going to remove Marcus from the plane. The other passengers were filming everything. Her supervisor would want a full report on why she had called security over what was obviously a valid ticket holder. But her pride, her training, and her need to maintain authority in front of the first-class cabin pushed her toward one final escalation. "Officer Santos," Isabella said, "I need this passenger removed for the safety and comfort of other passengers. He's been argumentative, threatening, and disruptive. As senior flight attendant, I have the authority to refuse service to anyone who creates a disturbance." Marcus looked up from his phone. "Disruptive? How?" "By sitting quietly in my assigned seat. by responding to your accusations with facts, by refusing to be intimidated by racial profiling. This has nothing to do with race, Isabella snapped, but her voice lacked conviction. Doesn't it? Marcus asked. You questioned my ticket without scanning it. You called for additional verification without cause. You assumed I was fraudulent, threatening, and didn't belong here. What exactly did you base those assumptions on? Bradford, who had been silent during Santos's questions, couldn't contain himself any longer. Look, this is getting ridiculous. I don't care what color he is. You don't care what color I am, Marcus interrupted. Is that why you told everyone I don't belong in first class? Is that why you said people like me need to learn their place? Is that why you assumed my ticket was stolen? The cabin fell silent. Even the ambient noise of the aircraft seemed to fade as 30-plus passengers focused their complete attention on the confrontation. Bradford's face went through several shades of red before settling on a mottled purple. I never said... I didn't mean... You said exactly what you meant, Marcus replied. In front of witnesses on camera recorded for posterity. You revealed exactly who you are and what you believe. Emma's live stream now had over 15,000 viewers. David's LinkedIn post had been shared over 100 times. Lisa's TikTok had gone viral with over 50,000 views in 10 minutes. The hashtags Vanguardia Discrimination and Flight 5A847 were starting to trend. But the most important audience wasn't watching on social media. Dr. Patricia Williams was listening from the Global Link Operations Center in London with her finger hovering over the emergency shutdown protocols that would ground every Vanguardia aircraft in the world. Sergeant Santos had seen enough. Ma'am, he said to Isabella, this passenger has a valid ticket, valid identification, and has not displayed any threatening or disruptive behavior. I cannot remove him from this aircraft without cause. Isabella's last pillar of support crumbled. Without security backing her authority, without clear grounds for removal, without any way to justify her actions, she was left with only her assumptions and her pride. And Marcus Williams was still holding a phone connected to the woman who could shut down a global airline with 6 keystrokes. Officer Bradford tried one more time. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Maybe we could work out some kind of accommodation. No accommodations, Marcus said firmly. No compromises. No quiet resolution. You both made your positions clear. You told me I don't belong here. You called me fraudulent, threatening, and disruptive. You tried to have me removed from a seat I purchased legally. He looked around the cabin at the other passengers, many of whom were still recording. You did all of this in public on camera in front of witnesses. You wanted to humiliate me, to put me in my place, to teach me that first class is for people who look like you. Marcus raised the phone back to his ear. Patricia, I'm here. Execute Protocol 7. There was a brief pause. Marcus, are you absolutely certain? Once I initiate the sequence, there's no stopping it. Marcus looked at Isabella, who had gone pale. He looked at Bradford, who was finally beginning to understand that he might have made a catastrophic mistake. He looked at the security officers who were shaking their heads in professional disapproval. He looked at the other passengers who were watching with a mixture of fascination and horror. I'm certain, Marcus said. Shut it down. All of it. The moment Marcus uttered those 4 words, shut it down. All of it, something shifted in the cabin. The other passengers, who had been treating the confrontation like an uncomfortable bit of drama, suddenly sensed that they were witnessing something much larger than a seating dispute. Emma Rodriguez, still live streaming to her growing Instagram audience, whispered urgently into her phone. You guys, something big is about to happen. This man just gave some kind of authorization to someone named Patricia, and I think, oh my God, you need to see this. Her viewer count had exploded to over 30,000 people watching live. Comments were flooding in faster than she could read them. Who is this man? Get his name. This is about to go viral. Someone Google him. Best live stream ever. David Park had paused his LinkedIn posting to capture video footage, but his business instincts were telling him that he was witnessing something unprecedented. The calm authority in Marcus's voice, the technical terminology he'd been using, the references to protocols and systems. This wasn't just an angry passenger making empty threats. This is David Park live from Vanguardia Flight 5A 847. He narrated quietly into his phone camera. I'm watching what appears to be a discrimination incident escalate into something much larger. The passenger being harassed just authorized someone named Patricia to shut it down, all of it, and I have a feeling we're about to see exactly what that means. His LinkedIn video was being shared across corporate networks at lightning speed. Comments from airline industry professionals were starting to appear. Patricia Williams is COO of Global Link. Wait, is that Marcus Williams from Global Link Systems? Oh no. Oh no. They have no idea what they've done. Lisa Thompson's TikTok had exploded beyond anything she'd ever experienced. Her follower count was climbing in real time as the algorithm pushed her video to millions of users. The comments were a mix of outrage support and growing recognition. Drag them, CS. This is why we record everything. Justice is coming. Someone said he's a CEO flight attendant about to lose her job. But it was the replies from aviation industry insiders that were most telling. Global Link runs the systems for most airlines. If he's who I think he is. RIP to this airline's stock price. This is about to be the most expensive discrimination case in history. Other passengers throughout the cabin were capturing pieces of the confrontation on their own devices. The businessman in seat 2C was recording with his tablet, providing a different angle of the encounter. The elderly couple in 3B were live streaming on Facebook to their family. Even some economy-class passengers had heard the commotion and were recording through the curtain that separated the cabins. Sarah Mitchell, the junior flight attendant who had initially served Marcus politely, was standing near the galley with her phone discreetly recording. She had recognized the discrimination immediately and wanted documentation to protect herself when the inevitable investigation began. The social media explosion was happening in real time, but the participants in the drama were too focused on the immediate confrontation to realize how viral the incident had become. Isabella was still trying to maintain her authority, even as she sensed that control was slipping away from her completely. Sir, I don't know who you think you are, or what kind of threats you're making, but this is still my aircraft, and I will not tolerate. Marcus held up his hand again, that same gesture that had silenced her before. 30 seconds, he said into his phone. The response from Patricia came through clearly. Commencing shutdown sequence. All Vanguardia systems will be offline in 30 seconds. Bradford finally found his voice. What systems? What are you talking about? Marcus looked at him with something resembling pity. You invest in airlines, Bradford, but you don't understand how airlines work. Every reservation, every check-in, every payment, every communication between aircraft and air traffic control, it all runs through computer systems. And I own those systems. The color drained from Bradford's face as understanding began to dawn. Isabella was still in denial. You can't shut down an airline with a phone call. That's not how. She was interrupted by her own communication device beeping with an urgent message from the cockpit. Around the cabin, passengers were beginning to piece together what was happening from the fragments of conversation they were capturing and the comments flooding their social media posts. Emma read aloud from her Instagram comments. Oh my God, you guys. Someone in the comments says this is Marcus Williams from Global Link Systems. They're saying he controls the computer systems that airlines use. Is that true? Are we about to watch him shut down this entire airline? Her livestream viewer count hit 50,000. David Park was narrating the revelation to his LinkedIn audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we are witnessing Marcus Williams, CEO of Global Link Systems, respond to racial discrimination by exercising his company's control over airline infrastructure. This is not just a customer service failure. This is a case study in corporate accountability that business schools will be teaching for decades. Lisa Thompson was practically vibrating with excitement. Y'all, the comments are saying this man owns the computer systems that make airlines work, like all of them, and he just told someone to shut them down because these racists tried to kick him off the plane. This is about to be legendary. The passenger in 2C, a software engineer who recognized the technical implications immediately, was providing running commentary to his own recording. For those who don't understand what's happening, Global Link Systems provides the infrastructure backbone for most major airlines. If they shut down Vanguardia's access, every plane stops flying. Reservations, check-in, crew scheduling, maintenance, tracking everything goes dark. This is basically the nuclear option for airline accountability. Even passengers who hadn't been recording initially were now pulling out their phones. The elderly couple in 3B were explaining to their Facebook audience, "We're on a plane where they tried to discriminate against a passenger, and it turns out he has the power to shut down the entire airline." Martha, you need to see this. The social media momentum was building exponentially. Vanguardia discrimination was now trending nationally. Marcus Williams was climbing the trending topics. Videos of the confrontation were being shared across every platform simultaneously. News outlets were starting to pick up the story. Aviation industry reporters were monitoring the hashtags and beginning to make phone calls. Stock traders were starting to pay attention to the social media chatter around Vanguardia Airlines. But inside the aircraft, Isabella was still reading the message from the cockpit with growing alarm. "Captain Morrison says we're having system failures," she announced, her professional composure finally beginning to crack. "Reservation systems, communication systems, navigation systems, everything's going offline." Marcus checked his watch. Right on schedule. Bradford was frantically typing on his phone, trying to access his trading platform to check Vanguardia's stock price. The applications were loading slowly, but what he could see was making his hands shake. "You can't do this," Bradford said, his voice rising toward panic. "You can't shut down an entire airline because of a misunderstanding." "Do you know how much money?" "I know exactly how much money," Marcus replied calmly. "I also know how much dignity is worth. And I know that some lessons can only be taught at a scale that makes them impossible to ignore." Sergeant Santos was watching the social media feeds over Emma's shoulder, his professional skepticism giving way to amazement. "Ma'am," he said to Isabella, "I think you need to understand what's happening here. This gentleman appears to have the ability to ground every Vanguardia flight in the world. And from what I can see on these videos, he's doing it in response to clear discrimination." Isabella looked around the cabin wildly. Every passenger was recording. Every face was focused on her. Every phone was capturing her next words for an audience that was growing by thousands every minute. The weight of what she had done, what she had set in motion, was finally beginning to penetrate her assumptions and her pride. Marcus was still holding his phone, still connected to his sister in London. Still in complete control of the situation he had not wanted, but would not back down from. "Patricia," he said, "how many aircraft are affected?" 152 planes across 47 airports in 12 countries, came the reply. 89,000 passengers. Estimated immediate impact, $2.1 billion in market capitalization. The numbers hung in the air like a death sentence. Bradford collapsed into his seat, his face gray with the realization that his airline-heavy investment portfolio was about to be decimated by his own racist assumptions. Isabella stood frozen in the aisle, understanding finally that her 15-year career was over, ended by her inability to see a paying passenger as anything more than a problem to be solved. And Marcus Williams, still calm, still dignified, still wearing his black hoodie and designer sneakers, continued to demonstrate that true power doesn't announce itself with expensive clothes or loud voices. Sometimes it just makes a quiet phone call and changes the world. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the cabin speakers, tight with confusion and concern. "We're experiencing unprecedented technical difficulties. All of our systems have gone offline simultaneously. Air traffic control has lost communication with our aircraft. We're going to need to return to the gate while we sort this out." The announcement sent a ripple of murmurs through the cabin, but Marcus Williams remained perfectly still in seat 1, his phone still pressed to his ear. Isabella stared at him with dawning comprehension. You actually did it. You shut down our systems. Not just your systems," Marcus replied calmly. "All of them. Every Vanguardia aircraft in the world just went dark." Bradford was frantically refreshing his phone, trying to access real-time stock information. The few numbers he could load were showing Vanguardia Airlines in freefall, down 18% and dropping. "This is impossible," Bradford muttered, his voice shaking. "You can't just... Airlines have backup systems, redundancies, government oversight." Marcus looked at him with the same expression he might give a child trying to understand calculus. "Bradford, do you know what Global Link Systems does? Some kind of computer company?" Bradford's response revealed exactly how little he understood about the infrastructure his own investments depended on. "We are the backup systems," Marcus explained patiently. "We are the redundancies. When an airline's primary systems fail, they fall back to our networks. When their payment processing goes down, they route through our servers. When their communication systems have problems, they use our channels." The implications hit Bradford like a physical blow. His face went from gray to green as he realized the scope of what was happening. Emma Rodriguez was narrating the revelation to her Instagram audience, which had now grown to over 75,000 live viewers. "Oh my God, you guys. He's explaining how he has control over literally everything. This isn't just one airline, he controls the systems that all airlines depend on when their own systems fail. This man just proved that he owns the digital backbone of the entire aviation industry." David Park was providing context for his LinkedIn audience. "What we're witnessing is a demonstration of infrastructure power that most people never see. Global Link Systems operates in the background of the global economy. When you book a flight, when you check in, when airlines communicate with airports and air traffic control, all of that data flows through systems like theirs. And this man just used that power to hold an entire industry accountable for racism." Lisa Thompson was barely able to contain her excitement. "Y'all, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. This man got discriminated against, so he shut down a whole airline company. Like planes all over the world just stopped flying because these people thought he didn't belong in first class. This is justice." The social media explosion was now reaching mainstream news outlets. Aviation reporters were calling their editors. Business journalists were scrambling to understand the technical implications. Stock market analysts were issuing urgent alerts about transportation sector volatility. But inside the aircraft, the immediate drama was far from over. Isabella was reading messages from the cockpit with increasing alarm. "Captain Morrison says air traffic control is reporting that all Vanguardia flights have gone offline. Boston, Miami, Los Angeles, London, Frankfurt, Tokyo, every single one. He's asking if we know what's causing it." Marcus smiled a cold, professional expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Tell Captain Morrison that the cause is sitting in seat 1A and the solution is very simple." Sergeant Santos, who had been quietly observing the escalating situation, stepped closer to Marcus. "Sir, I need to understand what's happening here. Are you saying you have the ability to shut down airline operations?" "Not just the ability, Sergeant. The responsibility." Marcus gestured around the cabin. "These people assumed I was a criminal, a fraud, someone who didn't belong in first class. They made those assumptions based on my appearance, my race, my clothing. They treated me with disrespect and contempt." He stood up, his presence somehow filling the entire cabin space. "I built Global Link Systems because airlines like this one wouldn't hire me 20 years ago. They said I didn't fit their corporate culture. They said I lacked the professional image they were looking for. Sound familiar? Isabella was backing away from him, finally understanding the magnitude of her error. Mr. Williams, I apologize. I didn't know who you were. You shouldn't need to know who I am, Marcus interrupted. You should treat every passenger with basic human dignity. The problem isn't that you didn't recognize me. The problem is that you assumed the worst about me without evidence. Bradford was having what could only be described as a panic attack. His hands were shaking as he tried to calculate the damage to his portfolio. Vanguardia represented nearly 20% of Meridian Capital's airline investments, and the ripple effects would impact every transportation stock in his fund, Mr. Williams. Bradford said, his voice barely above a whisper. Please, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But shutting down the airline, think about all the innocent passengers, the employees, the economic impact. Marcus turned his full attention to Bradford. Now you're concerned about innocent people. Where was that concern when you were trying to have me removed from a seat I purchased? Where was that concern when you told me I needed to learn my place? The cabin was dead silent except for the clicking and beeping of dozens of phones capturing every word. Marcus raised his phone again. Patricia, give me a status report. His sister's voice came through clearly. 152 aircraft grounded. Reservation systems offline globally. Payment processing suspended. Air traffic communication severed. Estimated passenger impact 89,000 travelers. Financial impact on Vanguardia approximately $2.1 billion in immediate market capitalization loss. The numbers landed in the cabin like physical blows. Emma was reading comments from her live stream. Someone in the chat says Vanguardia stock is down 27% and still falling. Airlines across the industry are dropping in sympathy. This is affecting the entire stock market. David Park was documenting the corporate implications. We are witnessing a real-time case study in the hidden power structures of the global economy. One act of discrimination has triggered a cascade effect that is impacting thousands of employees, millions of travelers, and billions of dollars in market value. Sarah Mitchell, the junior flight attendant, was still recording discreetly from the galley. She had recognized the discrimination from the beginning and wanted documentation to show that not all crew members had participated in the harassment. Captain Morrison's voice came through the cabin speakers again. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to speak with passenger Marcus Williams immediately. Please identify yourself so we can resolve this situation. Marcus looked up toward the cockpit. Tell Captain Morrison I'll be happy to speak with him. But first, I want Isabella Rodriguez and Bradford Kingston to explain to everyone exactly what they did and why they did it. Isabella was trembling now, her 15-year career dissolving in real time. I made an error in judgment. I should have verified the ticket properly before questioning, before assuming I was a criminal. Marcus prompted. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm deeply, deeply sorry. Bradford was crying, now actual tears running down his face as he watched his financial empire crumble. I don't know what I was thinking. I was wrong. Completely wrong. Please, you have to understand, I wasn't trying to be racist. You just thought I didn't belong in first class because I'm black. Marcus finished. Say it, Bradford. Tell everyone what you really thought. Bradford couldn't speak. The words were there, the truth was obvious, but admitting it out loud would destroy whatever remained of his reputation. Marcus waited for several seconds, then nodded as if Bradford's silence was answer enough. Patricia Marcus said into his phone, I want you to conference in Victoria Harrison, CEO of Vanguardia Airlines. I believe she needs to hear this conversation. Connecting now, Patricia replied. A new voice joined the call. Mr. Williams, this is Victoria Harrison. I understand we have a situation that needs immediate resolution. Miss Harrison Marcus said your employee Isabella Rodriguez and your passenger Bradford Kingston just demonstrated exactly why your airline has been receiving discrimination complaints. They assumed I was fraudulent, threatened to have me arrested, and tried to remove me from a seat I purchased legally, all because I don't look like what they think a first-class passenger should look like. The cabin was so quiet that everyone could hear Harrison's sharp intake of breath. Mr. Williams, on behalf of Vanguardia Airlines, I sincerely apologize for this treatment. This is absolutely not representative of our values or our training. Your training, Marcus repeated. Tell me, Ms. Harrison, does your training include guidance on identifying passengers who might not belong in premium cabins? Does it include coded language about appearance and cultural markers? The pause that followed told Marcus everything he needed to know. I see, Marcus said. So this isn't an isolated incident. This is institutional policy disguised as customer service training. Victoria Harrison's voice was strained. Mr. Williams, what can we do to resolve this situation? Name your terms. Marcus looked around the cabin at Isabella, who was crying, at Bradford, who looked like he might faint, at the other passengers who were capturing every moment, at Sergeant Santos, who was shaking his head in professional disgust. My terms are simple, Marcus said. Public accountability, institutional change, and personal consequences for everyone who participated in this discrimination. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And Ms. Harrison. Until those terms are met, every Vanguardia aircraft in the world stays grounded. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Bradford Kingston sobbing. The next 30 minutes would be remembered as one of the most dramatic reversals of power in corporate history, all unfolding in real time on social media platforms across the globe. Victoria Harrison's voice came through Marcus's phone speaker with barely controlled desperation. Mr. Williams, I'm looking at our operations board right now. Every single flight we operate is grounded. Frankfurt, Tokyo, Sydney, Sao Paulo. Nothing is moving. We have passengers stranded in airports across 12 time zones. I'm aware, Marcus replied calmly. The question is, what are you going to do about the discrimination that caused this situation? Emma Rodriguez was narrating the corporate crisis to her Instagram audience, which had now reached over 120,000 live viewers. You guys, this is unreal. The CEO of the airline is literally begging this man to turn the systems back on. Airlines around the world are grounded because these people thought he didn't belong in first class. The comments on her live stream were flooding in too fast to read, "This is legendary. Justice served cold. Stock market going crazy. CNN just picked up the story. This man is a king." David Park was providing corporate analysis for his LinkedIn network. We are witnessing the most expensive discrimination incident in business history. Conservative estimates suggest that every minute these systems remain offline costs the airline industry approximately $4 million in direct losses, not including the cascade effects on hotels, rental cars, and related services. Lisa Thompson was practically screaming into her TikTok. Y'all, this man just brought a global airline to its knees because they were racist. Every plane they own just stopped flying. This is what justice looks like when you mess with the wrong person. Inside the cabin, Isabella Rodriguez was experiencing the complete collapse of everything she had worked 15 years to build. Her supervisor was calling her phone repeatedly. Her union representative was trying to reach her. Her mortgage payment was due next week, and she was about to lose the job that made those payments possible. "Mr. Williams?" Isabella said, her voice breaking. "Please, I have 2 children. I've been with this company for 15 years. I made a terrible mistake, but please don't let my children suffer for it." Marcus looked at her with something that might have been compassion, but his voice remained firm. "Isabella, your children are not suffering because of what I'm doing right now. Your children will suffer because of what you chose to do 20 minutes ago. You decided to treat a paying customer like a criminal based on his race. You escalated a non-existent problem into an international incident. You did that, not me. Bradford Kingston was in complete financial freefall. His phone kept buzzing with calls from his partners at Meridian Capital, but he couldn't bring himself to answer them. His fund's exposure to airline stocks was going to trigger margin calls that would wipe out not just his personal wealth, but potentially the entire firm. You don't understand. Bradford pleaded. Meridian. Capital manages pension funds, university endowments, charitable foundations. When we lose money, it's not just me. It's teachers' retirement funds, it's scholarship programs, it's the consequences of your actions, Marcus interrupted. You made investment decisions based on industries you clearly don't understand, and you treated a fellow human being with contempt based on your prejudices. Those choices have outcomes, Bradford. Captain Morrison appeared in the first-class cabin, his face grim with the weight of the situation. Mr. Williams, I'm Captain James Morrison. I've been flying for 28 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Can you please help me understand what it will take to get these systems back online? Marcus studied the captain for a moment. Unlike Isabella and Bradford, Morrison hadn't participated in the discrimination. He was simply a professional trying to do his job in an impossible situation. Captain Morrison, have you been listening to what happened in your cabin? I have, sir. And I want you to know that what occurred does not represent my values or the values of the flight crews I work with. But we have 89,000 passengers stranded worldwide and whose fault is that? Marcus asked. Captain Morrison looked at Isabella, then at Bradford, then back at Marcus. The fault lies with the people who treated you with disrespect and discrimination. But the consequences are affecting innocent people. Marcus nodded approvingly. That's the first honest assessment I've heard from anyone associated with this airline. Victoria Harrison's voice came through the phone again. Mr. Williams, I'm prepared to take immediate action. Isabella Rodriguez is terminated effective immediately. We'll review our training protocols, implement new anti-discrimination measures, And what about Bradford Kingston? Marcus asked. Sir, Mr. Kingston is a passenger, not an employee. We can ban him from future flights, but Bradford Kingston is an investor in your airline, Marcus corrected. His fund Meridian Capital holds significant positions in transportation stocks. He used his status as a frequent flyer to intimidate and harass a fellow passenger. What are you going to do about that? The silence that followed was telling. Marcus made his decision. Patricia Confronts in the other airline CEOs, American, Delta, United, British Airways, Lufthansa. All of them. That will take a few minutes to arrange, Patricia replied. While they waited, the social media storm continued to intensify. Vanguardia discrimination was now trending globally. News outlets across the world were scrambling to understand and report the story. Stock market analysts were issuing emergency bulletins about transportation sector volatility. Sarah Mitchell, the junior flight attendant, finally stepped forward from the galley. Mr. Williams, I want you to know that I recognized what was happening from the beginning. I have recordings of the entire incident. Not everyone on this crew participated in your mistreatment. Marcus looked at her thoughtfully. What's your name? Sarah Mitchell. I've been flying for 3 years. Sarah? Why didn't you speak up when you saw discrimination happening? Sarah's face flushed with shame. I was afraid of losing my job. I'm still paying off student loans, and I couldn't afford to challenge a senior flight attendant. But you documented it. Yes, sir, because I knew it was wrong, and I wanted evidence in case something like this happened. Marcus nodded. Fear of economic retaliation is one of the ways institutional discrimination perpetuates itself. You were protecting your livelihood, but you were also creating accountability. That matters. The conference call with the airline CEOs took another 15 minutes to arrange. during which time the financial damage continued to mount. Vanguardia stock had lost 34% of its value. Other airline stocks were down 15 to 20% in sympathy. The ripple effects were spreading through hotels, rental car companies, and tourism-related businesses worldwide. When the call finally connected, Marcus found himself speaking to the CEOs of the world's largest airlines, all of whom were desperately trying to understand how one discrimination incident had triggered a global aviation crisis. Gentlemen, Marcus began, ladies, you all know who I am and what Global Link Systems does for your industry. What you may not know is that I've been flying undercover for the past month, documenting discrimination incidents across your airlines. He paused, letting that sink in. What happened on this aircraft today wasn't isolated. It was routine. Your employees are trained to identify passengers who might not belong in premium cabins, and that training creates a hierarchy based on race, class, and appearance. Your frequent flyer programs reward the wrong behaviors. Your corporate cultures enable discrimination. The airline CEOs began talking over each other, offering apologies, promising investigations, suggesting reforms. Marcus cut them off. I don't want your promises. I want your actions. And I want them documented, implemented, and monitored by independent oversight. He outlined his demands: immediate termination of all employees involved in discriminatory practices, comprehensive retraining of all customer-facing staff, independent auditing of complaints and incident reports, financial penalties for discrimination, and public accountability for institutional failures. Those are my terms, Marcus concluded. Meet them and Global Link Systems will restore your access to our networks. Refuse them, and you can explain to your shareholders why the aviation industry shut down. Because you couldn't treat customers with basic human dignity. The response was immediate and unanimous. Every airline CEO agreed to Marcus's terms. Victoria Harrison was the first to speak. Mr. Williams. Isabella Rodriguez has been terminated and will be escorted from the aircraft immediately. We're implementing your recommended changes starting today, and Mr. Kingston will be permanently banned from all Vanguardia flights. Bradford looked up in shock. You can't ban me. I'm an investor. I have millions. You had millions. Marcus corrected quietly. Check your portfolio. Bradford. Bradford's hands were shaking as he accessed his trading account. The numbers that appeared on his screen made him physically ill. Meridian Capital's airline positions had lost over $200 million in the past hour. Margin calls were automatically executing liquidating positions at massive losses. My fund, Bradford whispered. My partners are going to kill me. Your fund is finished, Marcus said matter-of-factly. Your partners are probably in emergency meetings right now trying to figure out how to explain to their investors that you destroyed a $12 billion hedge fund because you couldn't keep your racist opinions to yourself. Isabella was being escorted off the aircraft by airport security. Her badge and uniform items confiscated her 15-year career, ending with a walk of shame past dozens of recording phones. As she reached the aircraft door, she turned back toward Marcus. I'm sorry, she called out, her voice breaking. I'm truly sorry. Marcus met her eyes. I know you are Isabella, but sorry doesn't undo the damage. Sorry doesn't help the other passengers you've discriminated against over the past 15 years. Sorry is just the beginning of accountability, not the end of it. With Isabella removed and Bradford's investor status revoked, Marcus finally gave Patricia the authorization she'd been waiting for. Restore the systems, he said quietly. Within minutes, screens began flickering back to life across airports worldwide. Communication channels reopened. Reservation systems came back online. 152 aircraft began preparing for delayed departures. But the damage to Vanguardia Airlines, to Bradford Kingston, and to the entire industry's reputation would take much longer to repair. Marcus Williams remained in seat 1A, exactly where he'd started, exactly where he belonged. 3 months later, Marcus Williams walked into the same JFK terminal where his confrontation with discrimination had made global headlines. But this time, something was different. Mr. Williams. The gate agent, a young woman named Maria Santos, recognized him immediately and approached with genuine respect. "Welcome back to Vanguardia. Is there anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable today?" Marcus smiled. A real smile this time, not the cold expression he'd worn during the crisis. "Just treat me like any other passenger, Maria. That's all anyone wants." But he wasn't just any other passenger anymore, and they both knew it. The changes Marcus had demanded weren't just promises made during a crisis and forgotten afterward. They had become the foundation for industry-wide transformation that surprised even Marcus with its scope and speed. The Williams Protocol, as it had become known in aviation circles, was now standard across every major airline in the world. Real-time monitoring systems tracked customer service interactions for signs of discriminatory treatment. Staff training programs had been completely redesigned around dignity and respect rather than exclusivity and hierarchy. Independent oversight boards reviewed every discrimination complaint within 72 hours. Most importantly, the economic consequences of the shutdown had sent a message that reverberated far beyond the aviation industry. Discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was financially catastrophic. Marcus was flying to London again, same route, same flight number, but on an aircraft operated under completely new principles. The crew had been trained under the new protocols. The policies had been rewritten to emphasize inclusion over exclusion. The corporate culture had been rebuilt from the ground up. As he settled into seat 1, Marcus reflected on the personal cost of that confrontation 3 months ago. The viral videos had made him one of the most recognizable faces in America. His company had received thousands of partnership offers and consulting requests. Time magazine had named him Person of the Year. The United Nations had invited him to speak at their Human Rights Council. But fame wasn't what Marcus had wanted. Justice was. A different flight attendant approached a middle-aged black woman named Grace Washington. "Mr. Williams, I wanted to personally thank you for what you did. My daughter wants to be a flight attendant, and because of the changes you made, she'll enter an industry that respects her dignity." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't make those changes, Grace. The industry made those changes because the alternative was too expensive to ignore. Sometimes accountability requires leverage." As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Marcus received a text message from an unexpected source. It was from Ashley Torres, the college student who had been filming the original incident. "Mr. Williams, I graduated last month with my MBA. I got a job at American Airlines working on their new inclusion initiatives. I wanted you to know that your courage that day changed my entire career path. Thank you for showing me that one person can make a difference." Marcus typed back, "Congratulations on your graduation. You were brave to document what happened. Don't underestimate your own role in creating change." The reforms had extended far beyond policy changes. The Marcus Williams Foundation, established with $100 million from Marcus's personal fortune, was now providing full scholarships to underrepresented students pursuing careers in aviation hospitality and technology. 500 students had received scholarships in the program's first year. More quietly, Global Link had partnered with civil rights organizations to create anonymous reporting systems for discrimination across multiple industries. The technology that had once been used to shut down airlines was now being used to identify and address bias before it escalated into crisis. As for the individuals who had triggered the confrontation, their stories served as cautionary tales about the true cost of prejudice. Isabella Rodriguez had spent 3 months unemployed, rejected from every customer service position she applied for. The viral videos of her discrimination had made her unemployable in any role that involved working with the public. She eventually found work in a warehouse sorting packages on the night shift for $15 an hour. But Isabella's story hadn't ended there. 6 months after losing her job, she had written a letter to Marcus, not asking for forgiveness or requesting help, but taking full responsibility for her actions and their consequences. Mr. Williams, her letter had read, I spent 15 years thinking I was maintaining standards when I was really perpetuating discrimination. I destroyed my own career, hurt my family, and contributed to a culture that caused pain to countless passengers. I can't undo what I did, but I can acknowledge it and learn from it. I'm volunteering with anti-discrimination training programs, now sharing my story as an example of how bias destroys everyone it touches. Marcus had been moved by her letter and had quietly arranged for Isabella to receive job training in a field where her experience could become a teaching tool rather than a liability. She now worked for a consulting firm that helped airlines implement anti-discrimination protocols. Bradford Kingston's fall had been more dramatic and less redemptive. Meridian Capital had collapsed within weeks of the incident, wiped out by the cascade of losses from airline investments and the mass withdrawal of clients who didn't want to be associated with the fund that had triggered the crisis. Bradford had filed for personal bankruptcy, lost his Manhattan penthouse, and moved to a studio apartment in Queens. But more devastating than his financial losses was his complete ostracism from the industry that had once welcomed his wealth. He had become a pariah in financial circles, the cautionary tale that parents told their children about the cost of prejudice. His name had become synonymous with expensive bigotry. Unlike Isabella, Bradford had never taken responsibility for his role in the crisis. He continued to blame Marcus for overreacting and the media for blowing things out of proportion. His inability to acknowledge his own prejudice had made redemption impossible. As the aircraft climbed toward cruising altitude, Marcus opened his laptop and reviewed a presentation he would be giving to the European Union's Commission on Digital Rights. The topic was Infrastructure Accountability, How Hidden Power Can Serve Justice. The presentation included lessons learned from the Vanguardia incident, but it also looked forward to bigger questions about corporate responsibility in an interconnected world. Marcus had discovered that the power to shut down systems could be a tool for social justice, but it was a tool that needed to be used carefully and with clear principles. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom, the same captain who had handled the original crisis with professionalism and dignity. "We're beginning our descent into London Heathrow. Mr. Williams, if you're listening, thank you for flying with us today." The announcement drew a round of applause from passengers throughout the aircraft. Marcus waved briefly, uncomfortable with the attention but understanding its significance. As the plane touched down at Heathrow, Marcus received a phone call from Patricia. "Marcus, I just wanted you to know 0 discrimination complaints filed against any Global Link client airline this month. 0. In the history of our company, we've never had a month with 0 complaints." Marcus smiled. "That's not because discrimination stopped happening, Patricia. It's because the cost of discrimination finally became too high to ignore." "Either way," Patricia replied, "you changed an industry. You changed how millions of people experience travel. You proved that individual actions can have universal consequences." After the aircraft arrived at the gate and the passengers began deplaning, Marcus remained in his seat for a moment, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. He thought about the young Marcus, who had been rejected by every airline 22 years ago, told he didn't fit their corporate culture. He thought about all the passengers who had been discriminated against in silence without the power or platform to demand justice. He thought about the industry that had been forced to confront its own biases because the alternative was economic catastrophe. Most of all, he thought about dignity, how it couldn't be earned or purchased, only recognized or denied. As Marcus finally stood to leave the aircraft, Grace Washington, the flight attendant, approached him one more time. "Mr. Williams," she said, "I have one more thing to tell you. My daughter starts flight attendant training next month. Her instructors will be using the Williams Protocol curriculum. The first lesson is titled, 'Every Passenger Deserves Respect.'" Marcus nodded, genuinely moved. Grace, tell your daughter that respect isn't a company policy. It's a human choice, and every day she'll have the opportunity to choose dignity over prejudice. Walking through Heathrow Airport, Marcus was recognized by several travelers who nodded respectfully or offered quiet words of thanks. He had become a symbol of something larger than himself, proof that justice was possible when power was used with purpose. The confrontation on Flight 5. A 847 had lasted less than an hour, but its effects would ripple through the aviation industry for decades. Every training manual, every customer service protocol, every corporate culture initiative bore the mark of that moment when one man's dignity had collided with an industry's assumptions. Marcus Williams had not sought to become a symbol or a spokesperson. He had simply demanded to be treated with the respect that every human being deserved. The fact that this basic request had triggered a global crisis said more about the industry than it did about Marcus. But the changes that followed, the policies, the training, the accountability measures, the cultural transformation, those represented hope that institutions could evolve, that power could serve justice, and that individual courage could create collective change. As Marcus walked toward his London meeting, he carried with him the knowledge that sometimes the quietest voices create the loudest transformations, and that dignity once demanded can never again be quietly denied. In airports around the world, passengers were boarding flights with new confidence that their race, their clothing, their appearance would not determine the quality of their treatment. Flight attendants were approaching every interaction with training that emphasized inclusion over exclusion. Corporate executives were making decisions with the understanding that discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was financially ruinous. The man in the black hoodie had taught an entire industry that respect is not a luxury to be rationed, but a fundamental requirement of human interaction. And that lesson, captured in viral videos and embedded in corporate policies, would endure long after the headlines faded. Marcus Williams had not just reclaimed his seat in first class. He had redefined what first-class treatment meant for everyone. If this story moved you, if you believe that dignity belongs to everyone regardless of how they look or dress, I need you to do something for me right now. First, smash that like button. It tells YouTube that stories like this matter and helps more people see them. Second, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our videos about justice, courage, and standing up for what's right. Third, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Post it on your social media, send it to your friends, talk about it with your family. Because every time we stand up for what's right, we make the world a little more just for everyone. And remember, respect costs nothing to give, but its value is immeasurable. Drop a comment below if you've ever experienced discrimination or if this story inspired you to speak up. I read every single comment, and your stories matter. Until next time, keep fighting for dignity, keep standing up for justice, and never forget that sometimes the quietest voices create the loudest change. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.